And now, please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this week is now the final week where we get to delve a little more deeply in our all-church read, Tattoos on the Heart by Greg Boyle. Hopefully you've had a chance to read this book and participate in some of the groups we have going on. If you haven't, don't worry. You can still buy the book and read it through and enjoy every page and every story. The topic for today, again, some background. Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest who devoted his life to working in a very poor part of Los Angeles, and particularly a ministry with ex-gang members, creating what's called today Homeboy Industries that provides jobs and support for those who are trying to get their life on track. And the chapter that we're discussing this week in our various groups is a chapter that focuses on success. Now, when you think of the topic of success and you're a for-profit organization, it's pretty easy to see what success looks like. You have more profits. And if the company is not making profits, it's unsuccessful and eventually closes. But what about with nonprofits? How do you measure success with nonprofits? In recent years, many nonprofits have become obsessed with metrics, with trying to measure things, measure that they're doing the right thing. And there's a lot of good of this approach. One thing is it gives nonprofits accountability. It pushes them to try and do better, to figure out how they can help more. When I lived in Iowa, I was on the board of an organization called Youth and Shelter Services that provides in central Iowa shelters for people who were kicked out of their homes or ran away from home. It provides group homes for those in the foster care system, addiction recovery services for youth, adoption services. It's a remarkable organization, and the person who founded it, George Politzos, was brilliant at raising funds. And one thing that made him so good is that he knew how to talk about metrics and success. He could show people why their money, their volunteer time made a difference. And when I was down in Houston, one of the organizations that had been started by a member of the church was called Raise Up Families. Most people who are homeless are actually not chronically homeless on the streets. Most people who are homeless are folks who might be living paycheck to paycheck, and then all of a sudden something happens. The car breaks down, or they get sick and can't go to work. Next thing you know, they get behind on their rent. And then they might find themselves having to stay with friends for a period of time to get back on their feet, or maybe going from apartment to apartment trying to find the right deals. But the problem is when that happens, the kids in the family suffer because they're constantly going from one school district to another. And so this nonprofit, Raise Up Families, has social workers that work with families to do budgeting and also provide targeted financial assistance. And the success rate of this group is extraordinary. Metrics matter. But at the same time, as Boyle points out, are metrics the only way that we're supposed to measure nonprofits? Certain things defy easy measurements. Certain problems are intractable. Take, for instance, chronic homelessness. Once someone's been on the streets for more than 6 months, and particularly more than a year, that person has adjusted their life and their schedule to that new way of living. To try and tell someone who's been able to have complete freedom on the streets, as difficult as that might be, that now they have to be at a 9-to-5 job and accept orders from a boss to make not very much money, can be a tough sell. A lot of people who are chronically homeless suffer from mental illness or substance use issues. They've oftentimes have frayed relationships with those in their families. There are far too few Section 8 vouchers that can get people into a home. The organizations that deal with chronic homelessness have a difficult time putting forth metrics that you can look at and say, aha, that's success. The same thing with Greg Boyle and his Homeboy Industries. They're dealing with these ex-gang members, gang members, people who oftentimes are raised in broken families, who have failing schools and failing neighborhoods. It's very difficult to get some of these folks on the straight and narrow, and Boyle tells heartbreaking stories where some of the people that he knew actually get shot and killed in gang violence. How do we measure success? This obsession with metrics and success is something that you all know pretty well in your own lives. After all, if there's one thing that over time, particularly over the last 40, 50 years that has changed, we push success and metrics younger and younger than we ever did before. You've got little kids and you're trying to push them into the right preschool. I remember talking to friends who live in Manhattan and they say, oh gosh, as soon as your kid is born, you've got to start fighting and competing to get your kids into the right preschool. Or what about getting them into the right sports teams and travel sports teams as young as elementary school? And what happens when that doesn't work out? Then there's the pressure of grades that builds over time. Are you getting the right grades? Are you doing well in your extracurriculars? Are you going to get into the right college? And then you're in college and it's, are you succeeding in your various extracurriculars? And when I was at Harvard, they have on-campus recruiting that comes and tries to recruit people to bulge bracket investment banks and strategy consulting firms. And you can see the competition there. Who's the one that gets the coveted internship at Goldman Sachs or some other firm? And then once you're there, are you going to get into the right private equity firm or hedge fund or the right business school? Whatever it is, it seems like there's this constant cycle of metrics, 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 success. Are you living up? The lucky people are those who fail. Because when you fail, you have to answer the question, why? Why are we doing all this? In our story for this morning, a classic Jesus story, there's Jesus hanging out with all of the undesirables, described in our passage as tax collectors and sinners. We might describe them as a group of sex workers or people who are suffering from addiction or homeless people or whatever are the marks that marginalize people. Those are the people that Jesus is hanging out with. And the Pharisees come and they say, why are you hanging out with the ne'er-do-wells, the bad people? You're a good, pious rabbi. You should be hanging out with the good people, the people of the Wellesley Hills Congregational Church. And then Jesus tells this compelling parable. He's like, yeah, but imagine you're a shepherd and you lose a sheep. You'll go leave the 99 behind to find that one lost sheep. And then when you find it, the joy. And same thing with a woman who loses a silver coin. And he says it's the same thing with God. God cares more about those who are lost and broken than about your success metrics on the 99. God does not function on the so-called 80-20 rule, where you get 80% of the results for doing 20% of the work. God's focused on the one, not the 99. This is something that Boyle dwells on in his chapter and really tries to push it. He says at one point, he's like, the thing about Jesus is he frustrates both those on the right and those on the left. Those on the right get frustrated with Jesus because he's hanging out with people who are unclean, the people he's not supposed to hang out with. He's too weak. He shows compassion. Where's the tough Jesus, the strong Jesus? Also, he doesn't seem to care about the cultural wedge issues that obsess people today. But then Boyle says he also frustrates people on the left because he doesn't have any 10-point plan to fix poverty. Or he's not trying to have some sort of revolution to create a socialist utopia. Instead, he's sitting with people who are in need. And in the ultimate expression of going against the success culture, Jesus chooses to go to the cross. Here is the Son of God who chooses to suffer on the cross to show that as the way forward. He's not going to give in to the temptation to overturn a government, to fight with arms. He's going to go to the cross to show God's way. And that's the thing that Boyle brings up, is that oftentimes to find deep meaning in life, you do go through your own crosses. Sometimes those are the most memorable experiences for us. He tells this story in this chapter where after yet one more young person was shot in gang violence, yet one more person that he loved was killed, he went back to his office, and this was the final straw for him. He just couldn't bring all the grief in. Too many times he's had to go to the doorstep and tell a mother that her son is dead, and then hear the wails that rise up from that. And finally, it just breaks his soul, and he sits in his office, and he is just breaking down crying, and it's all coming out. And he tells the story about how this one worker there, Freddie, very problematic kid, deals with anger issues, in and out of various issues. But there he is that day with him, and he comes into his office, and he says, Father Boyle, or G, we're all feeling it right now. We're all feeling the suffering, but you've been one who's, when we're going through stuff, who's able to sweep us up and hold us. And then this poor kid says, if someone today, right now, were to give me $1 million, or say that I could swoop you up, I would swoop you up. And Boyle says, you just did. These meaningful situations that come through suffering and struggle. So this really is one of the key questions. One of the problems with success culture, or at least an obsession on success culture, an over-focus on success culture, is that it doesn't actually deliver what's promised. You get all your right treats. You get all the carrots. You've got all the carrots. The answer is everything's supposed to be perfect then. But it's not. Oh, you'll go on this vacation and everything will be better, and you're on the vacation and you're like, I was running around the whole time, I didn't feel like I could relax. Or you all of a sudden go out there and I've got this next success, I've got this next promotion, now what? Oh, my kid got this next great thing. Well, then there's the next thing that he or she has to get. One of the things in our society, even in a place like Wellesley, is this deep search for meaning, for real purpose. And what Boyle is trying to tell us, what Jesus is trying to tell us, is that real meaning, the stuff that makes life worth living, oftentimes goes through suffering, oftentimes goes through a cross, but it's also something that's grounded in the eternal, grounded in God somehow. That's what we do here. One of the things I love about all of you as a congregation, I admire this so much in all of you, is how much you care for one another. This is not a success metric. The deacons take these flowers and deliver them to people who are going through hard times, and then can visit with them and show them an expression of God's love. I remember when I was told, and I was shocked, that by far the most downloaded thing on our weekly events is the parish register. Because you all want to see who's going through hard times so you can write a note, or send an email, or make a phone call, or pay a visit. Those things are deeply meaningful because they get you in touch with God, and those defy success culture. Or the opportunity to hear brilliant music offered to the glory of God and how it lifts your soul and gives you hope at a time when other things seem hopeless. Or trying to help others in the community, and the difficulty of that, but also the depth of meaning that can be found there. Our society is so devoid of meaning. That's one of the reasons why we see so much hatred today going on. And yet what Boyle is saying is if you focus on the success culture, you won't get it. There's something deeper, there's something more important, and we find that with God. Greg Boyle found his own path. He listened to God's nudging and found his own path working with gang members in Los Angeles. The question is, in your journey, on your search for meaning, what is your path? And how is that path going to lead you to God and to truly living? That is success.